Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Comic Timing, a discussion on comic books, comic book characters, adaptations, and pop culture. Comic books, as we all know, is a very popular genre of books amongst a lot of people. And today we will be discussing our favorite comic books, our favorite comic book characters, the films that were made on it, and so on. So another week has passed, and we are back with yet another discussion. And this looks interesting, and because I am personally very thrilled to be a part of this, because comic books are something which I've been reading my entire life for the past 20 years. And here we go. Before that, let me introduce my panel to you. We have Abhinav Bhattacharya, my constant panelist, joining me from Bangalore. Good evening, Abhinav.
Hi, good evening, Akashdeep, and thanks, Minhaz, for joining.
Yeah, hi.
And joining Abhinav is my childhood best friend Minhaz Akhtar, which is another reason why I'm so happy today because I'll be speaking to my best friend on this discussion. Hello, Minhaz. So good to have you.
Yeah. Hi, Akashdeep, and hi, Abhinav. It's great to meet you guys.
Yeah, I mean, both of us live in the same city. We live like 5, 6 kilometers apart, but thanks to the COVID situation, we can't meet as much as we want to, and we are here on a video call. So yeah, COVID times, COVID sucks. Uh,
Yeah.
Letting the grievances, keeping the grievances aside, Minhaz, would you like to introduce yourself for our viewers?
Yeah. Hi, everyone. I'm Minhaz. I grew up here in Assam, and I did my schooling here. Then I moved on to Manipal for my engineering, and then I was briefly in Ukraine working until the pandemic hit us all, and here I'm back in my hometown again. So yeah, that's me.
Okay, Minhaz, let's kickstart the discussion with you. I just want to know about your beginnings when it comes to reading comic books. How did you get introduced to comic books? Do you remember the first set of comic books you landed your hands on? Was it a Batman or a Superman? Or was it from the iconic People's Bookstall in Joran?
That's a surprising story, actually. Yeah, Kashif. The story is
Yeah.
funny, actually. My earliest memory of reading a comic book is on my seventh birthday. It was a gift from my uncle, and it was an issue of the Phantom. And the Ghost Who Walks made such a huge impact on my then easily impressionable childhood memory. And that's I subsequently started finding out more about that colorful universe. And I found out more about the Phantom, the Superman, Nagraj, and Supandi, among others, actually. And I was actually thrilled to find all these characters in all the colorful universes. And they formed an integral part of my childhood. And I was particularly fond of Tinkle and Tinkle Digest, to be specific, and also Amar Chitra Katha as a kid. But I used to wait religiously for the Tinkle to be published every month to hit the nearest bookstall so that I can grab my hands on the latest issue. So that's my earliest memory of reading a comic book.
Okay, thank you, Minhas, for sharing your insights on that. Abhinav, coming to you. How did it begin for you? Like your journey with comic books?
Well, Akashdeep, as Minhaz has mentioned, everything starts with that, right? Comics as a kid. So,
Yeah.
as been essential, the topic for discussion is today. I mean, comics is the window to literature, actually. And as a kid, one holds a comic first, then slowly graduate to a novel category. And such was my case too. I love Tintin by Hergé and Asterix as well. But my favorite character there was Obelix, not Asterix. So, had he not fallen into the cauldron of magic potion, which the druid in their village had cooked up, I guess he wouldn't have been so interesting a character for me. But then finally, it was well made, and of course, then I guess around middle school, uh, I got introduced to Commandos, a brilliant set of comics based on the spoils of World War One and Two. Brilliant way to go about the genre fiction element there, because their stories is sometimes better than certain novels you write. So so that's the competition, right? But people uh, do like different genres. So comics is not just for kids. So that's what the whole point is today. And finally, during my later years in school, I was into Archie's comics. Jagged again, another quintessential character there. Exactly. And Jagged is a character which I always love more than Archie because there are very various reasons to that, personal though. And
Yeah.
Tinkle,
Yeah.
Absolutely, I can imagine.
Tinkle is
Absolutely. Yeah.
widespread, like wildfire or even a pandemic. I think Tinkle has spread throughout the subcontinent. But for me, I would say no, sorry. But yes, a few um, Amachitra kathas were well covered, and not all, but some of them were really well covered. And I believe what a series to start with, because sometimes people, if you do the socio-economic categories, right? People learn first from comics before doing anything else, and especially kids in India. So that was very quintessential. And yep, so that was my initial days into in terms of my comic book experience as a medium.
Abhinav, I think Minhaz and I, we collectively share the same sentiment when it comes to Jughead. Even though it began with Archie's, but that was the character I loved the most. And if you look carefully, this is a Jughead double digest, not an Archie's. And so I love that character more than Archie's and Reggie and Betty and Veronica. And then
Sure.
20 years down the line, there came a series called Riverdale, which
Ex-
was an utter disappointment, utter disappointment. So let's not stand on that here. Minaz, tell us about your favorite character, series, universe, whatever you prefer.
That's a very tough question to answer, to be honest, because considering the huge number of characters that have been introduced all over the years in my life, but I'll be honest, like the first comic book character that made a huge impression as a kid and being my utmost favorite is probably the Mask. And I was particularly envious of the things Stanley could do while wearing the mask, and
Yeah,
I was really into that whole dangers and like crazy ideas about the whole concept of the whole thing. And but more recently, I think the live screen adaptation of the Daredevil on Netflix was brilliant. It's a brilliant piece of work, actually, I think, and totally texturally different from all the other things that Marvel has done in the cinematic universe. That's probably one of my favorite things to talk about and watch, to be honest, when it comes to comic books. And also, apart from that, DC made a huge impact. DC made a huge impact in the animation series, because they used to make all these different, starting from the original animated Batman series, and after that, yep, exactly, that was great. That was one of the best adaptations to
yeah,
be brought on small screen and big screen. On the big
yeah.
screen, DC has been consistent. More recently, to be honest, they made a movie on Deathstroke, like one of the most bigger nemesis of Batman, and then
Yeah.
they also made a movie on the origins of Superman. And apart from that, it was great, actually. But DC has been consistent on the animation forefront, while Marvel has been consistent on the cinematic live forefront, dealing with all that comic book superheroes and everything. Yeah.
Yeah. Another thing which DC recently came up with was the trailer of the new movie, the Batman, starring Robert Pattinson, in which I said, "My name is Vengeance." So that was something really
That was
interesting, which
brilliant.
absolutely. I mean, I never thought somebody like Robert Pattinson could actually pull it off, but prima facie, given the trailer and the first look, I'm actually pretty hopeful.
To be honest, I had never any expectations to start with, because in my opinion, expectations lead to disappointments. But this guy Pattinson, he went above and beyond my negligible expectations, and he totally nailed on the role, to be honest. And like more than Bale and all the other people who portrayed Batman on the live screen, this character so far has been like really promising on the trailer from me. And Riddler being the main villain in the movie, this is going to be an interesting watch.
Now, because when it comes to the villains, there's actually a departure from what the villains that were shown in the Christopher Nolan trilogy or the DC extended universe that come between Batman and Superman. I'd just like to ask you one more question, since we're hovering on the topic of Batman, which happens to be my most favorite character. Pick your favorite: Michael Keaton, Christian Bale, Ben Affleck, Robert Pattinson.
Affleck doesn't come anywhere near that. He shouldn't be in the comparison.
Thank you so much for calling a spade a spade. You passed my
Yeah,
test. Now
yeah,
let's boil it down to the main question.
yeah.
Michael
It's a
Keaton,
tough question,
Christian Bale.
actually, because to be honest, the portrayal of Batman was nailed down to the inch by Michael Keaton. But the fact that Christian Bale had the help from Nolan to make the movie.
Yeah.
So he was
Yeah.
complimented by Nolan. That's the sole reason why I'm going to choose Bale over Michael Keaton. I know you're a Michael Keaton fan, but the thing is, like, for me in the Batman trilogy, Bale made a huge impression on me more than Michael Keaton did.
Not necessarily. I'm not exactly a Michael Keaton fan, but okay, let's not waste more time on this. We can have a special discussion on Batman later.
Absolutely,
Special.
it's gonna
I'm
last
ready to
an
do a
entire
special.
day, I think.
I know it'll last a week, 168 hours straight. Okay. So coming back to Abhinav, what's your favorite character or series?
I totally agree with Minhaz on one point about the wars, the special wars between Marvel and DC, which is
Absolutely.
it's bigger than any world war, right? and
Yeah.
and it will always go in, and that's how the creativity is coming out basically. And there are different wars today, but of course the comic wars, I think Marvel and DC has to be on the top. And for my
Yeah.
favorite, Obelix and Gatatronics were quite interesting characters, again from the asterisk set of comics. In terms of
Yeah.
larger series of comics, I would say the point, just to point out, Japan and comics were up there always. And Tite Kubo, the creator of Ichigo Kurosaki, the character and the series of comics is a definite favorite for me. And how fantasy crosses realism and what brilliant portrayal of the same. Absolutely special mention here again is Tsugumi Ohaba's, Death Note, the manga series. So manga is something,
Yeah.
and with illustrator Takeshi Obata from 2003 to 2006, which has over 300 million collected volumes in circulation today. So brilliant. And Japanese comic industry is huge, magnanimous rather. And the watchable version of a manga is basically your anime. And can
Yeah.
even the West think about fighting with them? No way. But they don't, commercialize it so much. Or even if it is commercialized, a lot of people don't know about it. Maybe because it's not in, I would say, a universal language like English. You know. So that's the reason. But then the industry is the industry. The real industry lies in Japan.
Absolutely, yeah.
Thank you so much. Yeah. Thanks, Avinav, for sharing your insights and bringing to us another fresh perspective of this one country called Japan, where comic books, you know, they command a lot of tremendous fan following and importance and significance culturally. So that brings me to my next question. Like, comic books have been a significant part of cultures across many countries. You can call name like you have India, you have Japan, you have the entire Wild Wild West. What are your views on this? I mean, as the questions for you.
Okay, that's an interesting question.
Yeah.
Comics, with the rise of the Indian middle class and its purchasing power and
Yeah.
indigenous production, have been, gradually becoming an integral part of children's world in India today. Like almost all the Indian children, especially those belonging to the lower middle class and above, living in the urban areas, grew up with comics available to them in a wide area of choices. And
Yes.
through the decade of the last century and into our own, comic books
Yeah.
have influenced culture as well as reflected it. And
Yeah.
now, an ingrained part of our cultural lexicon, these characters, conventions, art, and even language of comic books are everywhere, including advertising, politics, entertainment, in addition to being the subject of a growing field of scholarship, to be honest. And from the humble beginnings as the reprints of comic strips, comic books have matured into works of art, literature, and cultural significance in their own right. So this is what has been the most, defining moment for comic books across cultures in India, Japan, and worldwide, to be honest.
Okay. Abhinav, coming to you, what's your take on the significance that that comic books hold when it comes to cultures across various countries, be it India, Japan, or the West?
I prefer to point Minhaj just made around the socio-economic categorization, and then how you divide into the world, mass together when it comes to comic books. Because comic books is everywhere. People might not read literature in detail too much in certain countries, but comics definitely, right? So I would say, to begin with, I would say Japan. Yeah, they were the West always feels they're the best, but then Marvel and blah 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 and DC, I believe again. But yes, Japan is undisputed winner, as the culture in Japan proves it. I met an elderly gentleman when I was flying abroad once from he was from the Kansai region of Honshu in Japan. He had a big fat comic in his hand. It was bigger than it's almost like a quadruple digest he had. And except for the first 10-15 minutes into my inquiry and odd minutes when he was chatting with me, the rest of the 9 hours of that, grilling journey, he was reading it. That's the passion people have in Japan in terms of comics as a medium. They enjoy it. I mean, definitely, that's something you do. In India, a grown-up man, holding a comic might have been trolled invariably, definitely, thanks to Comic Con at last in metros.
Yeah.
It isn't taboo. So imagine Indian villages, a grown man holding a Amar Chitra Katha might get disbanded from his friend circle, or possibly a panchayat would have held a meeting to bone him from the village itself. So things need to change. But yes, I believe more than Tinkle, Amar Chitra Katha, reigns across all geographies in the Indian subcontinent in terms of the content. But then Tinkle uh, cannot be disregarded, because I think every schoolboy across the Indian subcontinent goes for it. So that's my take, and a special mention from the West, Batman: The Killing Joke by Alan Moore. Wow, that was something else.
Okay, Abhinav, that was interesting to note actually. I would like to add that since you mentioned about that old man carrying the big digest, right? And I would never imagine someone, about my age or maybe older than me, like carrying a book, carrying a comic book in public, reading around instead of a novel or something. That would, draw glares, and like, I don't know how would people, react, to be honest. This man, if huge props to him for sticking to his passion and like going through with it, and while reading comics, even though he's like past the age of reading comics, this shows his enthusiasm and love for the whole art.
I think it's
Yeah, Minhaz,
Japanese culture allows that. Indian culture, if you do that, people might think differently. So I think culturally, Japanese folks are quite, thick in terms of this, in terms of comics, especially as a genre.
that actually, what Minhas said, that actually reminded me of an incident which happened to me. I was in my final year of my graduation. I was 22 years old. I had just purchased a collection of Archies. There were no plastic bags back then, and I'd forgotten to carry my backpack, and I actually had to carry those comic books as like I was carrying contraband or something. People who understood actually gave me this look. Like they were like, why is this not so young kid carrying these books? And that is something which separates our culture from the Japanese culture. And in Japan, irrespective of your age, your appearance, or your sense of maturity, you can always flaunt your love for comic books. You can wear it on your sleeve, and that is something which deserves applause. And kudos to Japan, the Japanese, and the manga and anime lovers.
Okay.
Coming to my next question, this is something related to the comic books and characters which have been adapted into various TV shows and films. These films have enjoyed a tremendous fan following across all age groups and geographies, and they also play a very crucial part in the pop culture, the popular cultural scenario of the world. Minaz, how do you see this? Like anything you like to say on the adaptations? Any adaptation that caught your attention in particular? Anything that you loved watching and you still do? So the stage is all yours. Anything you want to say on the topic of the adaptation of comics, the characters, and the shows and the movies that have been made so far?
Thank you, Akashdeep, for the question. The thing is, with more than 100 films and television shows either currently airing or scheduled to be released or in development, there is no
Yeah.
argument that comics have taken a center stage in pop culture, to be honest. So that's the first and foremost thing that I want to say. But to be honest, if we dive back, into the origins, prior to 2008, when Iron Man and the Dark Knight released in theaters, kicking off comics and pop culture explosion. Comic books stuck only to the most popular characters like Batman, Superman, X-Men, and Fantastic Four, and etc. And predominantly appeared on television as the animated series.
Yeah.
But Iron Man and the Dark Knight had changed everything, leading to an unprecedented increase of pop culture based comics. But
Yeah.
more recently, there has been an explosion of the Japanese comics manga that have continued to make their mainstream popular culture. From the continuation of Dragon Ball Z to American films inspired by manga like Ghost in the Shell, it's clear that comics from all parts of the globe have become more popular than anyone expected back in the early days of the industry. And to add fuel to the fire, we have created three divisions actually: the Marvel fans, the DC fans, and the Japanese anime fans, and the fans who love all three of them. So this has been an interesting take, to be honest. And like, in my opinion, in my humble opinion, there is no Marvel DC. Like, if you're an avid comic book fan and fan of all the comic book characters, there shouldn't be a division and ostracism between the Marvel and the DC, universe. They're all in the same, and they are supposed to bring joy and entertainment to you whenever possible. So this is my take on this.
And Minhaz, you rightly mentioned about the year 2008. That was a significant year for comic book adaptations because on one side you had John Favreau and Robert Downey Jr. and Stan Lee. They came up with Iron Man, which kickstarted the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And on the other hand, you had DC, Christopher Nolan, Christian Bale, who came with the second installment of the trilogy, which was The Dark Knight. And that was a very, very significant year when it came to the cellular adaptations of movies because that was the actual year when these two, DC and Marvel, these two universes were actually in competition. They were competing for, you know, popularity,
Center
fame,
stage.
number of screens, and so on. But it was also a great year for people like us who enjoy comic books out and out.
Absolutely, I was delighted, like to get the live screen adaptations of these popular characters on the big screen. I was
Yeah.
absolutely thrilled and delighted to see them on screen, to be portrayed so perfectly by these two both actors, and this kickstarted the whole fan base thing for me.
And it was followed up another year, which was equally significant, was 2012 when they came up with the first Avengers film, and
Absolutely,
Christopher Nolan concluded his trilogy with Dark Knight Rises. Another
I never
significant year,
imagined.
and
I never imagined the whole ensemble of cast to be in one big movie, and it was
yeah,
I felt like a child again in a candy store, like seeing all
yeah.
those big characters on screen and fighting side by side. It just fuels your imagination so far.
So it was for some comic book fans, it was like one door closing, another door opening because here you had the inception, inception of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. You like
I see what you did
the
there.
Avengers. Thank you so much. The Avengers assembled for the first time, and
Yes.
here we had Batman saying goodbye. The Christopher Nolan's Batman saying goodbye. I remember I cried like a baby after watching that movie. I mean, Dark Knight Rises, the entire trilogy was such a significant part of my life. Batman Begins came. I mean, the it covered a very significant phase of my life. I mean, Batman Begins came out in 2005. I was 11 years old. I mean, I was like preteen. And when Dark Knight came out, I was a teenager. And when Dark Knight Rises came out, I was about to, exit my teenage years. So the entire phase of 7 years, those films were really very special to me. Batman Begins, Dark Knight Rises. So when it ended and Christopher Nolan said, "Okay, this is it. I'm moving on from now. I'm moving on from this," and even Christian Bale said, "No, that's it. That's done." So that came as a you know big shock and it was a sad moment for me as a fanboy. But yeah, but still, over the past 8 years, a lot of adaptations have come up, and there's no looking back. But yeah, a little bit of nostalgia still lingers on. And yeah, Abhinav, what are your views on this?
I would say for the three of us and certain fans and most of the fans, actually, this is the UN moment, the United Nations
Yeah,
moment between Marvel and DC. When the huge fight happens,
yeah,
just watch everything or even read everything, right? So that's very important as a fan that you have to be UN. you know. And this is a cultural fight, and we have to enjoy it as fans. So that's something, or even readers, this is something which is pure in terms of the creativity both groups have made on, of course, not forgetting Japan and the rest of the world. And of
Yeah.
course, I would say Chacha Chaudhary by Pran and its consequent TV series in India, launched around
Yeah.
2002, was not bad. I liked it. It's up in Disney Hotstar these days, by the way. And here, just Tintin is now up in all forms, both TV and movies. I like the Spielberg version, Steven Spielberg version, where especially my favorite character would be Haddock for my personal reasons. Totally, total secret there, and
Captain Haddock.
Captain Haddock, and had really
Captain Barnacles.
blown me away as a character of just a thought process which he brought into there. And Ichigo, again, I didn't read always, saw the numerous seasons and endless episodes. Never bored me. Japanese anime, again, in this case, is something else. And again, the Death Note depiction was brilliant. I would say Death Note was classic when it was depicted on, the popular media. And I mean, that's me, and I really like it.
I'm glad you mentioned about Death Note because a friend of mine had introduced me to manga and anime. So I never read Death Note. I've not yet read Death Note, but he gave me the Japanese anime, and he just said that this is a Japanese series. I said, what is it about? So it's about a magic book. And like, what does the magic book do? Does it grant you a wish? Does it give you what you ask for? He said, no. You take the book, you write your name, you write the name of somebody, and that person dies. I said, are you kidding me? Then he said, no, go home, watch it. I went home, I binged it straight, and I met him after a week or something. And I said, okay, that was mind blowing stuff which you just made me watch. And yeah, that's interesting. Coming to my second last question of the discussion, Minhas, I would like to, since we have already hovered over the topic of, say, pop culture and fans and everything, that brings a very significant point of discussion here. I want to talk about Comic Con. Comic Con is a mass event in pop culture, and it is not for anybody else rather than comic book fans. People who love comic books, who love the adaptations, who love anime, who love manga, and so on. It's like, you know, like you have the Kumbh Mela in India, where the sages and the sadhus come gather. So this is like a small version of that, where only people who love and enjoy comic books gather for 3 days or 4 days or given any subjective duration of the event, and they do is they talk about comic books. So what do you have to say about this? Like this has become a significant aspect of our pop culture, given the current socio-economic dynamics of the world that we live in.
Yeah, so the Comic Con recently has been inseparable from comics and the whole comic book adaptation universe on the live screen and the silver screen. So the
Yeah,
annual San Diego Extravaganza has become one of the main, if not the main, purveyor of pop culture. From movie premieres and sneak peeks to panels of stars promoting the latest projects on television or streaming video. If it matters in the pop culture industry, it is happening in Comic Con.
Yeah,
So, and following in the footsteps of the SDCC, the San Diego Comic Convention, lately we have
yeah,
seen numerous comic book conventions across major cities that garner huge crowds. And with the convention is, while the convention is like inherently an extravagant marketing ploy, in my opinion, I'm happy
yeah.
about the whole enthusiasm and the positivity it fuels across generation of comic book lovers alike. So this is what I thoroughly enjoy, the enthusiasm and the happiness and the joy that people share over a common love for comic books during these Comic Con events, and the whole dressing up and the whole shenanigans. To be honest, it's quite dazzling, and for a kid it's absolutely mind-blowing. It's like Disney World for them.
This is what you call a kid in a comic book, kid in a candy shop. Sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is where you actually put in this phrase. Like you enter Comic Con and you have somebody dressing up as Batman, somebody is selling DC merchandise, somebody is dressed up as Iron Man, and so on. And you are free to interact with anybody you want. You're free to buy whatever you want, and it is a marketing ploy, of course. There is a big, a lot of economics goes behind this, but the end result is something that is so beautiful.
Yeah, the being transported into the whole comic book world in live in front of you and meeting those characters, and these characters are dedicated to the art. Like they made some stellar performances while interacting with the
Yeah,
crowd, right?
Mm.
So this
yeah,
is something to look forward to. But then again, like I said, it's primarily a marketing ploy. Like last
yeah,
year's San Diego Comic Con events sold a 3-day ticket for $250 and above that. So inherently, it's
yeah.
just a marketing ploy to gain more, business into the whole venture. But when it comes to everything else, it's just again, yeah, I would love to be a kid in a candy shop. Who doesn't want to? Even though you're spending for it,
Yeah.
it's a great experience, to be honest.
Thank you, Minhaz, for sharing your views on this. Abhinav, what are your views on the entire concept of Comic Con, the massive event in pop culture?
Comic Con, I would say more than anything, anywhere else or anything else, I guess it should spread more in India, not just the metro.
Yeah,
Maybe now they need
yeah,
into cities and townships altogether. You will be surprised at the fandom and popularity in smaller cities in India. Brilliant idea. It would be even better if they do, regional, you know, uh, focus around characters, because there are a lot of regional languages here with different, comic characters altogether. Like we mentioned, we brushed across a few, like the big mass, popular of comic books. They read more around, Amar Chitragatha or Tinkle, but there might be a lot, there are a lot of great connections in southwest and east, or even the north. So it would be great if it spreads well. Brilliant idea and great mass event. I had the privilege of attending it once in Bangalore, and wow, what an event! And boom.
Okay, that brings me to my last question. This is how I usually conclude all my discussions. I want to sneak peek into your personal life. I want to sneak peek of your study room. I want to sneak peek of your bookshelf. Minaz, so what are you currently reading?
So my current read is a book that I have been wanting to read for a long time, to be honest, and it has been on my list for quite a while. I never got around reading it, and it's probably one of the books that I think almost everyone who reads has read. So this is what I'm reading right now. It's called The Fountainhead by Ayn Rand, and I intend on finishing it this time. So this is why I picked up this book today.
Okay, that's interesting. I hope you enjoyed the book and do share your feedback with us. And Avinav, the last word.
I would say Ayn Rand's, as Minhas had mentioned, Ayn Rand's Fountainhead is always up there, right? And it's something which I had pleasure to read as well. Very important mention today, Akashdeep, is this particular, comic. I happened to be reading it. Finally, I got my hands on it. It's called the Tintin in Congo by Hirsch again. Very important mention for social causes, especially Black Lives Matters. And back in the day when Hirsch was young, he first created Tintin in Congo. So it's banned in entire Africa for obvious reasons, and he had apologized even, but the damage had been done. If you go to any bookshop in India or abroad, you will hardly find it, except in the in especially in Belgium, the homeland of the creator, Herge. And any Tintin series you pick up, you just flip on the back side. You see, you don't get any mention of the special edition of Tintin in Congo. I was intrigued and finally got a very special delivery done from outside of India. Here it is shocking. It's shocking. I mean, no doubt hers was small, very young at that age, not even teenage, I would say 12 years old. I understand, but it shows European culture, and the picture is not very cool. Africans have been depicted in very low light in socio-economic terms. My humble request to all Western creators: please consider racism-related content very seriously while editing, and to create equality going ahead. Because this doesn't happen in India, or especially in the Asian subcontinent, in terms of comics when it's been published, and comics especially. And cheers to that.
That's a great
Okay.
thought, Abhinav.
Yeah, thanks.
Yes. Thank you so much, Abhinav and Minas, for joining me. And before I conclude and say goodbye, I'd like to conclude this discussion on a very sad, heartfelt note. The world woke up to the sad news of Chadwick Boseman passing away yesterday following a long, hard fought battle with cancer. This has come as a massive jolt to the world of cinema and the creative space in general. Boseman was battling cancer since 2016, and despite all the challenges that he faced, he continued to do what he loved and gave us a lot to enjoy on the big screen. So I'll just like to say, like, my condolences to his family and his loved ones, and rest in power, Chadwick Boseman. You'll be in our heart and our collective conscience forever. Wakanda forever.
Wakanda forever.
Totally.
So,
And
Akashdeep, the thing
Minaz,
about that
yes,
is like the news of Chadwick Boseman's demise, unlike other celebrities, felt a little personal to me. Just like Alan Rickman's death and Robin Williams' death. He was a brilliant actor and who tirelessly gave his best to the film community. But what particularly astonished me was the fact that he gave all these power-packed performances, dazzling performances in 6 movies, and 4 of them being, superhero movies. Like the stress and amount of hard work he, went through to, prepare for that superhero role was mind-boggling, to be honest. And this he did while battling advanced stages of colon cancer. So this is something truly amazing, truly superhero in real life to me. And here's a relatively unknown fact about that person. Denzel Washington helped pay for Howard University students to attend the prestigious theater program at Oxford University during the summer, where they couldn't afford to go. And one of those students was Chadwick Boseman. And this shows like during a speech at Harvard University, Chadwick Boseman said that without Denzel Washington, there would be no Black Panther. And rest in power, peace, dear King. So this is what I want to say. The world will remember you for what you did.
Totally.
Wakanda
Minaz,
forever.
I'd like to add a bit here. This is a relatively unknown fact about the crucial role which was played by Denzel Washington in the life of Chadwick Boseman, and it was one of the award shows while Chadwick was on the receiving end of an award. In his acceptance speech, Boseman had said, he spoke about the role played by Denzel Washington in his life, and he said, which you already said, there would be no Black Panther without Denzel Washington, and all of us are standing on your shoulders. And that left, you know, Denzel Washington teary-eyed, and it was a very, emotional moment for fans like us. Abhinav.
Yeah, I would say first of all, R.I.P. to the soul, and what a character he was. In terms of a lot of people didn't know, even only very few people close to him knew that he was battling the disease. And since 2016, what movies he has created, and there were movies where he had lost weight, gained weight back to back, and in very huge aspects. And what sort of the screen representation of him was great, and there was no doubt he was the right character for Black Panther as well. And so all I would say is Wakanda forever, rest in peace.
Okay, that brings us to the end of this discussion. Thank you, Abhinav and Minas, for joining me. And that was the
Thank
comic timing. My name is Akashdeep Baruah. Thank you so much for watching.